Hello, and welcome to this special edition of CUNA's Economic Update. I'm CUNA's Senior Policy Analyst, Samira Salem. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. Today, we'll be considering the impact of COVID-19 on consumer financial well-being and how credit unions are responding. Specifically, I'll be sharing the results of a recent Morning Consult survey for CUNA focused on understanding three things. First, how U.S. adult consumers have been financially impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, how adult consumers are coping financially. And third, what kinds of support would be most helpful. Finally, we'll take a look at the results to date of an ongoing CUNA Economic survey of credit unions' response to COVID-19 and how that lines up with consumers' financial needs. So how have adult consumers been financially impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic? Consumers' financial well-being is threatened due to the COVID-19 crisis. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 17 million people had lost their jobs from mid-March to April 10, which is when the Morning Consult poll was conducted. The Morning Consult survey finds that 20% of all adults, so we can see that here, 20% of all adults say they have either been fired or furloughed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's hard to find an adjective to describe how high these numbers are. But we see that a higher percentage of women, as we can see here, of low income, of Hispanic Latinx, as well as other, and Gen Z, say they've lost their job or been furloughed due to COVID-19. Now, traditionally, men tend to be fired or furloughed at a higher rate than women during recessions. This is not the case this time. Women, like Hispanic Latinx adults, low-income adults, and young adults tend to work in low-wage service sector jobs, which have been hardest hit by the recession. The survey finds that over half of all adults' gross impact has been impacted by the COVID-19 recession. And we can see that here. It's like lime green color. Again, we see that a higher percentage of most of the vulnerable groups, that is women, low income, people of color, say that their income has been impacted by the pandemic, right? Nearly a quarter of all adults are concerned about making their minimum bill payments during the COVID-19 crisis. Again, we can see that here in the lime green bar at the bottom. While all groups, regardless of income, race, or ethnicity, say that they are concerned about making their minimum bill payments, more than 1/3 of low income, we see that here, and Black African Americans here, and more than 1/2 of adults in the other racial group say that they are concerned about being able to pay the minimum on their bills. The survey asks consumers who expect to receive a stimulus check how they plan to use it. The highest percentage of all adults say they plan to use the stimulus check to pay bills and debt. So we can see that here, right there. The next highest percentage say they plan to spend it, and then you can see that in the red here. And finally, the lowest percentage of all adults said that they plan to save it, or at least save a portion of it. So you can see that in the gray bar right here. The highest percentage of most income groups and racial groups say they plan to use the stimulus check to pay bills and debt when they receive it. So here's a breakdown of how U.S. adults plan to spend their stimulus check. All adults in all income and racial groups are more likely to spend their stimulus checks on buying groceries to feed themselves and their families. So we can see that right here. There's buying groceries, and these are all the various groups, and there's certainly a higher percentage that are focused on buying groceries than paying for prescription medicine or spending it on themselves or their family. So as you can see, with the exception of Black African American adults, this pattern really holds across income and racial groups. So how are adult consumers coping financially? We know that U.S. adult consumers' financial well-being has been hurt by COVID-19. We can see that in some of the survey data I just shared with you. So the Morning Consult survey asked adult consumers about their financial coping strategies, including what they might do if they find themselves strapped financially and whether their spending habits have changed as a result of the COVID-19 recession. The survey finds that nearly 40% of all adults would turn to family members to first borrow money. So we see that here. That's that red bar. Nearly 30% of all adults would turn to their credit union or their bank. So that's the blue bar here. And 20% would use their credit cards. That's that gray bar. A relatively small percentage of all adults say that they would turn to payday lenders, friends, pawn shops, that's what you see right here, and churches first to borrow money. With the exception of upper income adults who say that they would go to their credit union or bank first, that's that blue line, the upper income adults. Most adults, regardless of income and racial groups, would tend to turn to their family first to borrow money if they were in a pinch. So that's why you see these red bars up here, right? 40% of all adults say that if they were in a position where they had to choose which bills to pay and which to postpone or skip, they would choose to postpone or skip their credit card bill. So that, again, is the red here. The next highest percentage of all adults said that they would choose to postpone paying their student loans. That's the blue bar. With the exception of Hispanic Latinx, this pattern really holds across all adults, and in all income and racial and ethnic groups. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, increased financial pressures have resulted in adult consumers changing their payment habits. So we see all adults using cash, debit, and credit cards, as well as digital services, more than before the crisis. That said, all adults are more likely to use debit and credit cards more than any other form of payment compared to pre-crisis. And here we see that in the gray and the blue bars represent the debit and credit card usage, the fact that they're using these more than pre-crisis. This pattern doesn't really hold across groups. We do see that a higher percentage of low-income Hispanic, Latinx, and white adults now use debit cards more than any cash or credit cards or digital services. So that's the gray bar, right? By contrast, a higher percentage of African Americans use cash more than alternative forms of payment as compared to pre-crisis. So if you can see, Black African Americans are using cash, which is the red, more of an alternative forms of payments compared to pre-crisis. Finally, digital services such as Apple Pay, Google Wallet, and Venmo are more important than credit cards for a higher percentage of Hispanic Latinx adults and Black African American adults compared to before the crisis. And that's the black bar for both of these groups. Right. Creditcards.com reports that in 2018, a higher percentage, actually it's nearly double, a higher percentage of African Americans as well as Hispanic Latinx did not have access to credit cards compared to whites. Given this, it's not surprising that during the current crisis, these populations are using alternative forms of payments like digital services more than before, and certainly more than credit cards. U.S. adult consumers are also adapting their spending to their changing financial circumstances. Nearly 40% of all adults say they have refrained from a major purchase or investment, while nearly 1/4 have reduced or stopped charitable giving. You can see that here. There's the nearly 40% that have refrained from major purchase or investment, and the nearly 1/4 that have reduced or stopped their charitable giving. And 13% have actually increased charitable giving. This pattern generally holds across the income and racial groups represented here. The Morning Consult survey asked a series of questions to get at what financial solutions might be most helpful for adult consumers. Respondents were asked separately to separately rate how helpful or not the interventions listed here would be. And as you can see, a higher percentage of nearly all groups identified restructuring loans and mortgages to lower their monthly payments, cash donations to local charity groups, and delaying payments on existing home mortgages and loans. They characterize these as very helpful. Interestingly, the largest percentage of Black African American adults say that a 90-day credit card payment deferral would be a very helpful financial solution to them. Consumers have been reaching out to their financial institutions to help them find solutions to the challenges they're facing. Of all adults that have contacted their financial institutions, the highest percentage say they did so to request payment deferral. The next highest percentage of all adults say they contacted their credit union or bank to take out a loan. And the smallest percentage of all adults contacted their financial institution to find some other financial solution. All adult consumers, regardless of income or race and ethnicity, are more likely to contact their financial institutions in search of payment deferral. So you can see that here. Right, with all these various groups, the percentage which indicators say that they're contacting their financial institution to defer payment is higher than these other alternatives. In March, CUNA and ACUL launched a survey to find out how credit unions are responding to help support their members' financial well-being during this time. And here's what we're hearing. Credit unions across the nation are responding quickly, responsibly, compassionately, and always with a focus on members' financial well-being. It's really encouraging to see that the ways in which credit unions are responding line up with what consumers and members need at this moment. The survey is ongoing, so we're continuing to learn from credit unions about what they're doing and regularly updating these results. You can find both the survey and the results on CUNA's COVID-19 Response Center. Even if you've completed the survey before, we encourage you to share any updates with us. Here are some COVID-19 related resources. CUNA's Response Center puts a lot, or COVID-19 Response Center puts a lot of important information from research to advocacy to compliance and more at your fingertips. Check it out. Thank you for your time today. As always, if you have any questions about the surveys I discussed today or credit union data related questions, please feel free to reach out to us at qstat@cuna.coop. Stay safe and stay healthy.